And the chair, Dr. Carmen Sultan, and I am present. When I call your name, please indicate that you are present. Vice Chair Utz,
Present.
Board Member Anderson. Not present. Board Member Hernan,
Present.
Board Member Johnson Davis.
Present.
Thank you.
The first item on the agenda is the role of the school board in accreditation. Mrs. Lynch, please provide context and introduce our speaker.
Good morning, everyone. I am delighted to welcome you. As you are aware, we will be going through our Cognia Accreditation Engagement Review next year. It really is focused on continuous improvement, and you're going to hear all about that today. Our review is scheduled for the third quarter, or the official part, which is the January, but it's kind of ongoing like throughout. Right now, we've already had, inclusive of myself, 4 cabinet members and our project manager go through the training online to prepare us to lead all of this. So you're going to learn a lot more about it with the whole board training today. I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Emily Klein. She has in her presentation some more information about herself. So I will just say that she is with Cognia, and she is also a Decatur resident. So we are very excited to have her here and as our contact today. So Dr. Klein.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much. So this is probably the shortest commute for you.
It is, and that's like the one fun fact I never get to have on my bio slide, but I got to have it today. So yeah, I am a Decatur resident, so I'm thrilled to be here. So we are going to talk a little bit about continuous improvement and accreditation, actually a lot about it. But the first thing I want to do is just kind of get to know everyone so that I know who I'm talking to. We can start having conversations, because there is going to be time in this presentation when we're just talking, where we're just thinking and reflecting, and we're not coming to conclusions, but this is part of the continuous improvement process. So it works better when I know who's in the room. So Madam Chair, may I start with you, please? If you could just tell me who you are, your role, and then how long you've been on the board.
Sultan. I live over in Winona Park. I've got 4 kids, now 2 that have graduated out, 2 that are still in the system. I work over at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. And I've been on the board since 2020.
Perfect. Thank you for your service. Right, Vice Chair, please.
Yeah, Hans Witz. I've been on the board, same as Carmen, so we're coming up on our 4th year. I'm a inventor, and yeah, that's probably a good introduction.
An inventor. So we're going to maybe need to unpack that a little bit as we get through this presentation, because that sounds like a path.
I'm not sure that I chose it. It chose me, but yeah.
Sometimes that happens, right?
Hi, I'm Jana Johnson Davis. I've been on the board 6 years. I was a teacher here in the city of Decatur. I taught at school formerly known as Renfro. And I guess that's it. Yeah.
Perfect.
James Herndon. Jana was, but she served for an extra month more than me. And let's say I have two girls here in the city of Decatur, a rising high schooler, which feels big.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you guys. And then I know that we have a student representative who will hopefully be able to join us a little bit later. But I know that City Schools of Decatur is doing a lot of exams and things this last week of school to help prepare our kids. So I'm Emily Klein. Like I said, the fact that's not on there is that I am a Decatur resident. So I am thrilled to be able to be here. I have 2 children who are in the system. My oldest is a junior and so a rising senior. Super excited about that. He cannot wait, right? That's the whole point. You wait forever so that you can get to do that. And then I have a 7th grader who will be a rising 8th grader. And I love the system, but I'm also a Georgia educator. And so I have been working in Georgia, oh my goodness, for almost 20 years. So I started my career in Texas. I was a special education teacher, but then I took a little pathway to go get my PhD. And through that, I was going to be an academic. And so I came to Georgia and worked at Georgia State because I was going to be an academic. But sometimes you just can't leave. You can't leave K-12. It calls you. I've never had the calling, but I had the calling. So when I was getting ready to move across the country and take an academic job, I couldn't sleep. And it was because I wasn't done. And I love K-12 education. So I ended up working as a special education coordinator with Gwinnett County Public Schools. And I did that for about a decade. And then I worked in Henry County Schools as a director and then eventually an assistant superintendent. So I joined Cognia this June, so I'm coming up on my 1-year anniversary. And I made that switch because my favorite thing about education is the spirit of continuous improvement and the way that we are constantly getting out of bed every day to make things better for children. And so working for Cognia was my way of being able to do that, not just in a district or a school, but across the state. So I love it. So thank you for having me here. So I'm going to reintroduce you to Cognia because when I worked with Cognia on the school side, I really was just focused in on accreditation, and it is what we're going to focus on today, but it's actually a lot more. And there were things about the organization that I didn't know that I think are important to share. So Cognia is a nonprofit. It's a global nonprofit, and we accredit schools and systems across the globe. Our vision and our mission are really important to us. I start every presentation with them, and I always want to share it. So our vision is to impact and inspire education providers to advance and enable pathways for success for all learners. Really resonates with me, and it's something that is, the spirit of all of the districts that I've worked with has something like this, and I love that Cognia is aligned to that. And that our mission, because we're not there, we're not the boots on the ground, is to really serve as a trusted partner with our schools and with our districts so that we can make that better future for our kids and advance learning. So Cognia, you might be like, what is that? I promise you've heard of us, and we've been around for a really long time. We're celebrating our 130th anniversary. Because we've evolved and we have changed, our name has also changed with it. That happens when you bring on new services and products and merge with different companies. But if you're still calling us SACS, that is us. Right, so we've been doing accreditation in Georgia and in the United States for a really long time. We then had a name change to Advanced Ed, and now we are Cognia. We've been partnering with City Schools of Decatur since 1932 when we accredited the high school. So it's been a long-standing partnership. And we appreciate that, and it helps us know the story of the districts that we work with. Like I said, we are the world's largest accreditation and improvement network, 130 years of experience. We are in 40,000 schools and districts across the globe, over 100 countries. So the benefit of Cognia accreditation, because it's a choice, right? There are other accreditors. The benefit of that is that it really is globally recognized and known. And so that's a benefit to any student or teacher leaving the system that has the accreditation from Cognia. So we do offer the accreditation and certification, but then this was just one of the other pieces that I wanted to talk about, because continuous improvement isn't just an accreditation process. It's also understanding that you need to develop your staff. And so we offer professional learning. We have additional improvement services like strategic planning. We also then can do some customized assessments so that you have data and information to make instructional decisions for kids. Today, we'll focus in on accreditation, but I just wanted to share that because I wanted you to know that we see the whole piece of the. You have some documents in front of you, and I will talk you through them quickly, but I just wanted to let you know, in case you're not a note taker or you feel like, oh my goodness, I need to take pictures of the slides, we will be sharing those with you. So you'll have access to those as a resource for you. In your folder, there's a couple of things that I'll just call your attention to. If anybody is a note taker, there's a little thought catcher. You don't have to, again, optional. You're adult learners, you do what works for you, but if people need it, I always want them to have that so that you can follow along. And then they're going to be this characteristic 2, standard 8 will be something we'll do an activity on. And then you have all of our performance standards there. Those are also publicly available if you need to see them. All right, are there any questions before I start? All right, make sure you guys are oriented. So our learning targets today. We're going to describe the purpose and expectations of accreditation and the engagement review. We're going to understand the essential roles and responsibilities of the school board as they relate to Cognia's accreditation performance standards. role of the school board is different from the role of the employees of the school system. We're going to connect the Cognia accreditation performance standards through the lens of governance, right? Because those are the seats that you're sitting in, and then reflect on that role of governance in advancing continuous improvement in the district. We also aligned this to the Georgia State School Board governance standards for local boards. Our CEO was involved in the development of these, and so there is nice alignment. We are separate from the Georgia School Board Association. This training is completely separate, but I did want you to know that it does align in with your requirements and standards. All right, so we're gonna just do a little bit of talking and peer sharing, because continuous improvement, you have to do a lot of introspection and thinking about things where you want to improve. But I think there's also benefit in taking some time to pause and celebrate some successes and think about the things that are going really well. So what are you guys most proud of as a school board member? And or, you have choices here. What do you believe is having the most positive impact on students in your district? And I'll give you a minute to just think, and then we're not going to do this formally. You can just pop out with an answer and share.
I'm really proud that we got a student board rep on our board. I mean, we're the first in the state to do that. So I think that voice is critical to hear, and I think that elevating in that way is going to be proud to be a participant. In terms of the biggest impact, I think Decatur has been great over the years at touting its most successful kids. I think it has been a little less transparent about serving its less successful children, and it's not the children's fault. It's our inability or our previous unwillingness to focus there. And I think this board has been extremely focused in, up to like ensuring that we have a superintendent in place that is also focused on making sure that we're looking at the ability to educate all children and how are we serving all children in the district, and previously we were not doing. So I think that impact, making that switch, is one of the most one of the largest positive impacts I think we've had as a body.
I think, I'll start, what do you believe is having the most positive impact on students in your district? And this may sound kind of cheesy, but I really think, Dr. Whitaker's cabinet, our central office staff, I feel like, and that's what I'm saying cheesy because they're right here. But I'm not, as a teacher, I've not always felt as confident about our central staff as I do now.
Yeah.
And I feel like they are really our experts in their field, in their areas. And so often in board meetings, we hear about central office being so top heavy and, and I have always disagreed with that, because I have felt also that our folks have been stretched, and we didn't have enough folks to really focus on. They were assigned so much responsibility, and so I think that our students are reaping the benefits of their expertise.
That's a really good insight.
He's up for election.
I could combine these two together in that, I think we have started to make some actual tangible gains with a population of students that had some clear educational deficits. So namely, some of our students of color in some very pointed areas. So 8th grade math and reading, 3rd and 4th grade reading, US history, where we kind of figure out with some kind of laser focus where some of those students were having trouble. And I think in previous years, we figured out that there was a problem, but identifying the problem and coming up with a way to solve it are two different things. And it takes time to kind of see some of those benefits, but in some areas, we've seen some rapid gain. And then in some areas, we haven't seen quite as fast a gain, but we've started to see the wheels turn. And I think that that not only is been a goal of the board, and the superintendents of teaching and learning, but it's also directly impacting students. I think if we can figure out where our students are most educationally vulnerable and put some metrics in place to catch them and turn them, then that's much easier than remediating. So things like some of our reading initiatives that we started to turn that back all the way back as far as like first grade, kindergarten even.
Thank you for sharing that.
I keep thinking of budget related things, whether that's, you know, we had a slide, so don't quote me the exact numbers, but like a starting teacher in 2019 is making almost $15,000 more in Decatur 6 years later, but the majority of that happening in a fiscally responsible way. So I feel like to teach in Decatur, you don't have to sacrifice financially to do it. We're getting there, and then giving those raises through the pandemic, the budget book itself, you know, just lots of stuff to be proud of. And I mean, let's just join Dana's cheesy train. I mean, Dr. Broom is awesome. You know, doesn't get enough credit, and the sit like refinancing the bond, and like what was, I think it was like her first year on the job. She's like, hey, y'all, I'm gonna refinance this multi-million-dollar debt and save taxpayers money. And I think like I'm the only person who ever talks about it. So there's a lot of stuff along that. I remember running for election, like we need to get teachers competitive, and you know, we're close to $60,000 in total comp for a first year teacher with a certificate now, and that's a long way to go. But it's probably the only job in Decatur that's kept up with inflation since the pandemic.
And I love that. And thank you for sharing that. And I think that this is a really good experience in just hearing the different lenses, right? Of what you're focusing on, where your continuous improvement efforts are, right? But then the theme of taking care of people, taking care of the kids are all there. And a lot of that, the reason we do this is a lot of this is what the accreditation review is about, is really pulling together a team of experts and saying, here is our data, here's our information, here are the things that we're trying to achieve. Where are we in the process? And then not just where are we having problems, but what might be, right, our next actions for improvement. And maybe not getting it 100% right away, but continuously trying and continuously trying to be better. So thank you for sharing that. All right, so the essential roles and responsibilities of the school board, the primary responsibilities for school boards, and some of this is repetition, but this is just, I don't think it ever hurts to continue to repeat things that are important, really is to help establish the vision and goals for the school district. Be aware of policies, laws, and regulations that impact the work of the district, and then adopt those local policies to help improve the work. You need to hire and evaluate your superintendent. Agree, and that'll be something we talk about.
Not you.
Adopt and maintain an annual budget that is aligned with the vision and needs of the local school district. And then you guys serve as leaders and representatives of the community in advocating the interest of students in the school district, right? That is one of the interesting quirky things about being an elected school board member is you are not actually speaking, right, for your voters. You are representatives, but you are really acting and speaking on behalf of the students and all students, not just the ones that are in your election zone.
How common is that across the
That I think is a good question. I can only speak about Georgia, but in Georgia, it's for sure codified, right? That is clear and the way that it is. as someone who had worked as an educator, I love that, right? Because I don't want to be just a representative for my own students in my own classroom. I love that we're doing work for all kids. I'm a special educator, all kids hits my heart. And so I love that they're elected representatives that are speaking on behalf of all children. So the bucket list for effective governing boards, right? You start with your vision and then you need to fill your buckets with these things. You need to have that good communication and teamwork. You stay learner focused and learner centered. And learners are not just the kids. That's something that we have really sort of adopted and thought about now, is remembering that the adults that work for the system are also part of that learner community, and we need to pay attention to that. System focus, right? So we're not trying to necessarily solve a problem in one classroom. We're thinking about what's the system that may have contributed to that, and how do we make changes there for improvement. Strategic thinking and planning, so not just reactive, but also being very proactive, trying to forecast as much as possible, plan, and respond to that. Having clear goals. I was having a little sidebar conversation with Amanda, right, about having a student representative on the school board listening, and what a good experience that is in trying to figure out what are your priorities and how do you stay focused? Because it's very easy to listen to a school board meeting and say, oh, that's something I want to talk about. That's something I want to chase, right? But you can lose focus on your big goals. And so, I mean, it's just a great experience to be able to practice that. And then having that sound budget and your effective policy. That's your big lever as school board members. That's truly how you impact change in the district. And then, of course, you know, some things that are not so great, right? That we just try and avoid. And I always believe it's important to have the non-examples, not because anyone's doing it, but sometimes it helps you just see where's the line, right? When have I maybe crossed over and I need a friend to pull me back? And so things that are not effective, things that really slow down the process, or the aimless talking. And that's where maybe we have something that we feel like we have to bring up and talk about over and over again, but it never goes anywhere. And maybe it's important to bring up, but then maybe it's also just a place of reflection, right? Is there a different way that I should be approaching this? Because the time when we're together as a board is really valuable. For conduct, being unprepared, that is one of the things. So we have these experts who are in the district office, and I know that they work really hard to make sure that board members are prepared and have the information that they need. And so when that happens, there is the expectation that board members are reading and processing and digesting that information, so that when a district leader standing in front of you, the questions that they're getting are truly things that are new and not stuff that was necessarily you could have known ahead of time. Again, we're not perfect and these things happen, but it's just something to keep in mind. Rubber stamping. So GMA, you know, as much as they love and trust you, they shouldn't just rubber stamp everything. Nope.
That's not something they do.
Yeah, those questions that you ask of your superintendent are important, because you are acting as a board and you do need to feel confident and comfortable with what you are doing in the district. But on the other hand, we're not going to micromanage either. I think you said that beautifully. We've hired experts who know what they're doing. They're the right people in the right job, and we need to let them do that work, because we're going to govern. We're not going to be the experts on all the things. You can't. Your brain will melt out of your head. That's why you hired these amazing people. You guys are the governing team. And so you need to let them do that work. And then we're not going to have political or personal agendas. And again, it's a tricky thing to be an elected official, but who's serving in this unique role, and that you just have to wrestle with as a school board member. But just making sure that what you're doing is acting on behalf of the kids and not something that is political or personal. We're trying to get, try not to get derailed. We live in political times right now. All right, any questions or thoughts? All right, so now we're going to move to a little bit of questioning. If you need to think or jot down something, it is in your guide if you're just one of those people that needs to take notes first. But I'm going to ask you guys to kind of look at and think about first by yourself, and then we're going to have a conversation. How does your board ensure it's an effective governance team? And how are you holding yourselves accountable? as a school board? And how are you holding each other accountable? And then this question is really kind of to help lead into those. You don't necessarily have to answer, but just to kind of think about where I'm going is like, what does it look like, right? To respectfully agree to disagree, but continue to be effective, right? Because you can say, oh, well, let's agree to disagree, but then you stop being effective, right? So I want you to think about this. I'm going to give you about 2 minutes. Some of you might be faster processors than others. And then we're just gonna have a little conversation, but if you need to take down notes.
Yes. You can find it.
Give you like 30 seconds, and I'm gonna see. We're gonna open the floor up. If you're one of those people that needs to continue writing, you can write for a little bit more.
Yeah, so. I think it's impossible to overlook the personalities on the board because that plays into this so much. But I mean, we've done a ton of training together. And one of the things that really stuck out was when we did the ordinal north, south, east, west thing where we talked about communication styles and sort of the mental states of each of us and sorted us as to where we fit. And, you know, we tease each other a little bit about it when our, you know, various personality traits come to the fore. But what was so fantastic about some of that training was I don't speak to Jaina the way I would communicate to myself. Like I know now more where she's coming from and I can tailor the approach. I would talk to Carmen differently than I talk to James. And that sort of awareness of each other allows us to be very direct, but sensitive to what the other person will hear rather than just trying to be blunt for blunt's sake. James, I know James has commented on my tactfulness at times. I appreciate that. And so that gets to the third point where you know we're able to tell each other that we disagree, but because we have done the work and because at least speaking for myself, my level of trust and just profound respect for each of the other board members, that when we run into areas where we disagree, it's always like if Jaina and I disagree, I am not having a conversation with Jaina to try to convince her of my point of view. I'm having a conversation with Jaina because I respect her so much. What did I miss that we have a difference of opinion here? Let me see if I can understand. And we may still disagree, but that pivot is, I think, so critical when we're communicating as a body.
Okay, who wants to add on to that?
I was gonna add our book studies and discussions have, I think, helped us to work on becoming an effective governance team. Sometimes it's been affirming, like, oh, you know, we're already doing this. And then there have been things topics in our studies that have come up. And, you know, at least I've been like, I'm not sure where we're doing this. And so, we've done two, really almost 2.5, because we started one book and then switched to another one. So, in addition to the trainings that we get, from GSDA and trainings like this, we're not just here thinking that we know it all, already and just moving like that. You know, I think there has been some intention around learning.
Learning about each other, learning about how to work as a team.
About governance.
Okay,
Mhm.
so the book studies, I like that too, just listening and trying to talk to understand. All right, what else? What are you thinking there, James?
I was in my pediatrician's office late last week and there was a sticker that said, please don't let your kids climb into the drawers. And I laughed. My daughter's why. I was like, well, that's because there are some kids climbing into the drawers. As like, when you're a school board member, there are people telling you not to climb into the drawers constantly. Like, we get governance training, we get conversations, we get GSBA telling us what to do. We get reminders that is, I think I've probably been told, you know, it's not your job to be the superintendent or the day-to-day operations, but to have oversight of the superintendent for more than I was told to get my elbows off the table at dinner. Like, it is just there. And it's helpful. It's a good reminder, because otherwise I'd probably crawl into the drawer at the pediatrician's office a couple times. And as a board, we do that and we attend and, you know, we're good at that, and even almost self-policing too. I don't, you know.
Not almost, I think actually, yeah. Very much do.
Yeah, I think the longer you sit on the board, you get more and more on like, oh, there's certain things that I should be doing and certain things that, man, I don't, well, I personally don't have the bandwidth to get into, but even if I did, I feel okay with that, because I'm like, I don't have that capacity, or then that's not my job anyway. So I think the answer to the first and second is good, is like, as a governance team, there's lots of training books and one-on-one stuff, or just stickers. They don't do that.
So I like what you said about sort of trying to pull each other. So what does that look like if you're trying to pull each other in, or if you feel like somebody's stepping over? How are you holding each other accountable?
That's a tough one. I like it better when we self-police a lot.
Okay,
Like I can almost physically hear Jana sometimes, like things are like, oh, I got a question about that. Okay, I'll do it later, you know. All right. But when people don't do it, which has happened and continues to happen, it's like an aside, or we've discussed it with lawyers for legal stuff. I mean, that's because we're talking about kids, we're talking about equity, we're talking about grades, and we're talking about stuff that gets us out of bed as human beings and running for school board every day.
We've gently corrected, but like, so when Tracy first came onto the board, she didn't have any real training on this, and we would be in a public conversation and she'd ask a question that was clearly going into operational level stuff. And just very politely, we're like, actually at a governance level, we don't have to worry about that detail. That's on the superintendent. But I think what you're trying to get to is that, you know, I mean, just like a polite redirect rather than, you don't need to know about that, stop asking, you know what I mean? Like that's, it's, yeah.
yeah, so maintaining the collegiality, making sure that you can trust each other, yeah. What are you thinking, Carmen?
I think we've all, I think all of us, Tracy's not here to defend herself, but I think we've all kind of crossed the line a time or two into operations. And you know, I think some part of it is human. I think some part of it is just I think when I've done it, it's completely it's a lot of it's out of ignorance, not knowing what I don't know. And I think when, you know, some part of the discomfort is when maybe I guess to James's point, when we don't realize that we've crossed that margin into the superintendent or another cabinet member's kind of area of expertise. And then, I feel like sometimes that does fall on the board chair to sometimes say, well, this is probably a little more operational. I agree with James. It is nice when people realize, or collectively as a group in open conversation, you're like, this is not where we belong, and we all kind of as a collective step back. But sometimes it's not always that way. I think maybe the accountability piece of that is, from my perspective, is making sure everybody has access to the same information, and has, by virtue of that, has the same understanding. Now, everybody may not get to the same level of understanding at the same pace, or with the same tools. But making sure that everybody has the same understanding. Some topics are weightier than others, but I do think that, everybody has kind of unfortunately gotten into, some level of getting into operations, and it's had to be redirected. Whether or not we agree that we're where we don't belong,
Yeah,
I don't know, but, we've all been there.
yeah. And I mean, I think it is something that boards continuously wrestle with. Like, you are a human being, right? Human beings who care about kids, who care about your role, right? And so, of course, you're trying to do what's best, right? And I think it's just that place of having that self-awareness, right? And then being able to trust each other in those conversations of, hey, maybe we need to take that one step back, because right now, we're not acting in our capacity or our function as a board member. We've shifted somewhere else, right? And it's just having that trust, because you need to have those conversations. So I think it's good, and to not be so hard on yourself when you mess up, because human beings, we're going to do it. It's just being willing to say, oh, yeah, okay, I'm so sorry. Let me step back.
There was one I was got to add, I had written down, our annual self-evaluation that we do is another place for us to reflect, because I was thinking about, so that's a place for us to reflect as a governance team, but then also, how do I hold myself accountable as, you know, my own personal reflection on meetings, conversations, things like that. So I think that's a way that we hold ourselves accountable as a governance team and individual.
Well, I think it's a really interesting. I like the word accountability. I was in charge of accountability in the school district in Henry, and people thought it was this bad word, and I never thought of it as a bad word. It never was supposed to be a gotcha. I always saw accountability as much more about self-monitoring, right? And self-goal setting, and looking at my own results, and then changing practices and getting feedback on it. And so I think that can be a way that this board is holding themselves accountable, right? Is having personal and individual accountability, but then that trust, right? That somebody's got you. Nobody's gonna let you walk off a cliff. Right? I always say that to my team. Please don't let me walk off a cliff. It doesn't matter. Like, do not let me do that. You've got to stop holding back. Even if you think it might hurt me a little.
I don't know that we mentioned this specifically, but I do think there's a big part of the trust that I think we have for each other. If James corrects me or provides feedback or pulls me back from the cliff, I know that he's coming at it from a good faith focus on the kids. And so I'm not feeling personally attacked. I'm feeling helped, not attacked. And I think that holds true for each of us, I think. And so there's that. James is particularly tactful, so he's good at it. Wow. That's the last compliment.
Love it. I know. Should we be taking little tally marks with the compliments? Good. All right. Well, you said it, and so I'm not going to belabor it. There's so much training and things available for you, but I do feel like I have a responsibility to point you towards the original source here. So Georgia Department of Ed is always there to help you, as is GSBA. Our friends over there, we partner with them. And so just to let you know that they're there. All right, let's get here for what we actually came for, y'all. Cogni's accreditation process. What do school boards need to know? So the important thing about accreditation, right, is it's actually not just some sort of checklist, get a certificate, you're done. It really is, when you are with Cognia, a continuous improvement process, and there is a cycle. And these things are not unknown or unusual or new to school districts, especially high-performing school districts. Basically what we do is we take our standards, and we have 31 of them. And using those performance standards, the institution is then examining itself, looking at its current effectiveness, capacity, and capability to achieve and meet its vision and goals based on those standards. We're also then bringing in a third party to validate that for you. It's a very formative approach. So this is not state accountability. We're not coming in and saying, you know, we don't do the grade here in Georgia anymore, but right, it used to be like, you're a C district, you're an A district. We're not doing that. This is about, here's your current landscape, here's how you pulled it together, here's the picture of where you are, and here's where you want to go, right? And here's next steps to get there. It's really working and validating that. It is very, very data-driven. Very data-driven. And this is one place where people can be a little surprised about what happens with their accreditation report versus what they think. Because we really do, Cognia says it is wonderful to have the mindset. It is wonderful to be able to say the things that you want to say and to do all of that. But if you don't have evidence or data to back it up, then you're not in a position of strength, right? You were just at the beginning of the journey where you're talking. And so it is very much based on what's your data and what is your evidence. We bring in expert evaluators. So we have Georgia educators who have experience across the state, who have done many evaluations, who come in to support the team and to give that final report and evaluation. It is a continuous improvement cycle. So accreditation review is due every 6 years. That's a change. It used to be every 5 years, but what we were finding is that because it takes a year or more, truly, this team's really in the thick of working. It takes a year or more to truly go through the process that you need to go through to prepare your accreditation portfolio. 5 years was just not appropriate. We needed to expand that so that people in the district could do the work they needed to do to continuously improve. And so we spread it out to 6 years. And then there's ongoing touch points throughout that 6-year cycle. Cognia doesn't just come in, do your accreditation review and leave. We check in at least annually, and we're always available. And so Amanda should at some point put me on speed dial, because I'm there to be her thought partner and to just really help her if she ever feels stuck. And so I've been saying continuous improvement a lot. And if anybody's a data taker in this room, then you can start doing your little tallies on me for this one, because it'll be the word. So, but I want to make sure that we have an agreement on our definition. And so continuous improvement for me and for Cognia, it's a behavior. Right? It's not a, oh, I wish I were doing this. Continuous improvement is the behavior that is embedded in an institution's culture that constantly focuses on the conditions, processes, and practices to improve teaching and learning, right? That kind of narrows it down a little bit. So when we're talking about continuous improvement, it's not just wanting to improve it, it's that you are actually taking action. And so this cycle continues in a 6-year flow. The purpose of accreditation, and I think this is important for school board members, again, because one of your jobs, right, is you are acting on behalf of the students, but you are often called upon to speak to people and to explain things. So I want you to know, like, why is it important for the school district to go through the accreditation process? So there's several of them here. One of them is that it's really ensuring that your institution is moving through a rigorous and effective self-evaluation process. This district moves through cycles of self-evaluation constantly. And I know that, I live here, and then I've had conversations. But then this is the place where you bring in a third party to validate that for you, right? And so someone who can say, absolutely, here are the things that they are doing, and here are the places where they're still growing, right? And so it's not just the school district saying, yes, we're doing it, trust us. It is someone else who has the expertise coming in and saying, here you go, here's what we found, and this is what we saw too. It determines what degree the institution's meeting those universal standards, and they are evidence-based best practices for high-performing institutions. And I think that that's important because our state accountability system is, it has kids' interest in mind, right? But it is also part of politics. And politics change based on elections. And so our standards are there not to be representative of what is happening in Georgia right now, but to be universal global standards of excellence. And so that also can give you a place to focus on, knowing that as a school system, you're navigating all of the rest of it, and I get it. But to be able to look at those standards and say, based on evidence and literature and research and best practices, here are some key things that we're going to focus on to do what's right for kids. It provides feedback, obviously. At the end of this, your district is going to get a report that talks about what we saw, what we observed, some strengths, and then some areas for improvement. So it gives a very nice report that can be used to build your continuous improvement initiatives for the next 6 years. And then finally, partnering and having that accreditation really does show your commitment to your stakeholders, that you're committed to that transparency, that you are consistently pursuing excellence in education, and that you really are a district that's not just talking about continuous improvement, right, but doing it. And
This
so
is every 6 years?
every 6 years, yeah.
I was gonna, so regarding politics,
Yeah.
involvement in government and education, and so there, you all have not had to adjust or with executive orders. Are there things that we have, been engaged in as, governance teams across the country recently because of executive orders that you all have, is there anything here that could conflict?
So, well, that's a really, so our goal is no. And I will tell you that we've looked through it but the politics are changing really, really rapidly. Y'all have experienced this. And so you have a printed copy of standards in front of you. I actually encourage people to always go to our webpage for the most current and updated standards. We would not be changing the spirit, but there may be an occasion where we need to change a word, right, for clarity or to maintain focus on what we're supposed to be maintaining focus on, right, which is what is going to work for kids, the schools, and the district. So there were some language tweaks that did happen this year, and so those are in front of you. But again, the spirit and the purpose of those standards did not change. We do go through a review process, a thorough review process every 6 years, where we go and we pull all the literature and do a literature review and compare our standards and then make updates. But annually, we will make little tweaks to language if we need to, just because school districts need to focus on the work they need to do, not worrying about whether the wording in this, right, is matching the words. So if you see something in there, questions about it, first talk to GMA, and then if there's a question, then we'll come talk to you about it.
I know that James and Jana were just on the board, I guess, in the last accreditation process. Or the report was released. Were you guys on the board when it was done or when the report was released, or? Where I'm going is I'm curious what was in that report. Because I think we all have a pretty strong perspective that fairly substantive changes were required to be made in the system due to us probably not performing it. And I'm just curious how able the institution is to get at some of those needs through this process.
So I think as I go through, I think that's a really good question. I think it's something that you can talk to GMA about and just see how you want to approach it. But we did change our standards in 2022 significantly. So the pandemic just changed the landscape of education in a way that there was no way to maintain with what we had in the pre-pandemic times and still be able to meet the needs of what schools needed.
Yeah.
So you can't just take the old report and then compare it. We do, we've got tools and crosswalks, but they are a little bit different. And I would say that the standards now are the ones that are really going to be the ones that need to be the focus for improvement. I think it's worthwhile to look back sometimes just to see your progress and celebrate success, but they've changed.
I would say that the evidence-based nature of the standards aligns to our strategic planning initiatives that we put forth in the strategic plan.
We didn't even have a strategic. plan. like trying
When
to
it,
think.
yeah, so I didn't look back at the old
Got it, okay.
information. What I will say is I have taken all indicator, like these performance standards, and said,
Yeah.
crosswalk this. Where are the gaps? How might we fill them?
Yeah.
If you see any questions, which is why when Amanda shared earlier that so many members of cabinet have already gone through the modules and the things that really understand this, because in understanding this, you will be able to understand its alignment to the strategic plan, which will make our third quarter a lot easier.
Yeah, having the work already aligned does make the review process so much easier because all of your evidence and things you're monitoring all align. And that's ideally how it works, right? It shouldn't be an extra step. This should be just how the work is being done. So I love hearing that. Right, so accreditation really works best, and you just already referenced this. Self-assessment and improvement are already just part of the culture. It's part of what we're already doing. It's not just because Cogni is coming by. We've already been doing it. And then that review event is really seen as that opportunity for reflection and feedback. Not a gotcha, not a look what you didn't do. It is much more of a here's where we are, where do we want to go? Where are the gaps? Let's figure it out. The district really focuses on the impact of their programs, their systems, and their practices, not just compliance. And that's, again, another shift from the state accountability system and a little bit of a shift from our former standards where when I look at them, there's pieces of them where I'm like, I could have just checked box that, right? Do you have this check? Which that does not exist right now in the standards. And that it's a true peer review process. So it shouldn't be one person from the district doing this. It truly is a team because we need all of those experts on board to bring their perspective and their lenses and their expertise to inform what that report looks like. And then we also say that the findings need to be used formatively. This is your launch pad for the continuous improvement initiatives in the district. It is certainly not a gotcha. It's not something where people should be comparing across districts, that they should be comparing to previous reports. It should be, here's a report that tells us where we are and where we need to go next. So there are different types of accreditation reviews, and I'm not going to belabor this. The only reason I mention it is just because I never want school boards to feel surprised. If something comes up, candidacy review does not apply. That's for the very first time someone's going through it. Accreditation engagement review, or we call them AER, because you know it's education. If we don't have letters to stand for a process, it doesn't count, I guess. But accreditation review is what we're going through here in Decatur. But then we also have special reviews that happen. So if there's a complaint or investigation or something like that, Cognia does do special reviews as needed, and then monitoring reviews, which if your accreditation review says that, yeah, we can accredit you, but we saw some problems that will require monitoring, we would do follow monitoring reviews. Our accreditation engagement reviews are typically remote. There is an option to be on site. However, we do not ask that happen. We got feedback from school districts that when an accreditation team would come in and spend 2 to 3 days in a school district, rummaging through classrooms and pulling principals and talking to people, is very disruptive to learning, as you can imagine. Therefore, that is not where we start. We start with a remote process where we basically are having the school teams collect the information, analyze the information, and then we meet and debrief and review and do all of that. Typically, it works just fine, right? And that's great, so that we didn't need to disrupt anything. But that's why we have a monitoring review as a second step if needed. I just wanted you to see those. Again, feeling like you need to know any of that. And then the road to accreditation engagement review, I want you guys to have this, again, taking that high high level view, but just so that you know that it is a journey that this team's been on and that they are still on. It starts with planning, logistics, and training. We started talking about this in the fall. And then there's a self-assessment piece, which we'll get into a little bit, but that's the biggest component. They have to create and compile an entire portfolio of evidence and information and submit that to Cognia. There's culminates in a leadership presentation. And then all of that information is taken back to Cognia, where we do the internal review, and it goes through multiple levels before we then deliver the final. So it's a multi-step process, but there's a lot of work on the district side. And so at the end of an accreditation review, we do always say that there should be time to pause and celebrate, because I promise you this district team is going to have done a lot of reflecting, thinking, and collecting. And here's what they'll be doing during the self-assessment. And again, you guys don't need to be in the weeds of it, but just so that you know the types of information that we're going to be looking at and the things that will form the basis of the review. So there's an executive summary that basically is telling the story of your district, explaining who you are, what you're doing, why you're there. There's prompts that they answer. We have 3 required analyses, which sounds so simple when you say 3 required analyses, but anybody who's done data analysis knows it's not simple, like that you have to collect the data, then you have to analyze it and synthesize it. But what we're asking them to look at is your student performance, which I've already heard references to you guys talking about. I know you already have a system and a process for looking at all of that. Student performance, stakeholder feedback. Stakeholders, right, are going to be your families, your students, your staff, and then the learning environment analysis. And this is the one where Cognia is a little bit different, because a lot of learning environments, you go in and you're looking at teacher behavior. Cognia is actually asking you to look at what's the impact on the learner. And so we have a tool that we provide that can be used. Some districts use their own tool, but the important thing is we're not asking you to tell us about teacher behavior. We're asking you to talk to us about what's happening to the learners, because that's the point, right? The teachers could be doing the right thing all day long, but if it's not impacting the kids in the way you wanted to see, then it actually wasn't the right behavior, right? And then they do a standard self-assessment where they take all 31 standards, evaluate where they are on a scale of 1 to 4. They provide some assurances, and then you have to compile everything into an accreditation portfolio for us. So it is a lot of work. It's not something that somebody does over a long weekend. It has been an ongoing process.
I have a question. For the
Yeah.
stakeholder feedback, is that something that the district leaders pick? Is it like SLT leaders? How do they decide who goes this next?
So every district can do that in a different way. What all we ask, right, is we have some prompts and we have the standards. You need to be able to use the data that you've collected, right, to respond and provide evidence based on these standards and these prompts. So as a public school system, you guys do the Georgia Student Health Survey, right? And so some districts find that that is adequate and sufficient for them. There are also tools and resources that are provided as Cognia members. And so if a school district feels for whatever reason that they need to administer additional surveys, they can, but it's definitely not a requirement. We're trying to fit into the natural cadence of data collection within a school district rather than telling the school districts what they need to do. We just want to give them tools and resources and options so that they can get that feedback.
So one of the things we've been doing is looking at all of our different data sources and aligning them to each of the pieces to say, here's the data source that would fit this standard, here's the data source that would fit this piece. So we're collecting a lot of data and we're doing all that alignment to conduct the synthesis.
But that's a good question. And part of it is that we don't just accredit public schools, we accredit private schools too. And so a lot of those school systems don't have the same tools and resources that a public school does. So we always want to make sure there's some equity in what's available. So everybody gets access to the same tools, you just don't have to necessarily use them. And that was a really nice segue into the tools and resources. So just so that you know that Cognia membership, it comes with these tools and resources that can supplement and support your continuous improvement journey. Again, no one is required to use them, but there's in-focus guide to strategies, which can help with strategic planning, surveys where you can collect your stakeholder feedback. Some of them are developed. There's also the opportunity to customize those. We have our observation tools. We do have a teacher observation tool, but the Elliott tool is what I was talking about that really looks at student, the impact of the learning environment on students. We also have one for an early learning environment that's included. And then we have communities of practice and professional learning modules that can be used in a formative assessment library for schools. And then this is my favorite part because it is my seemingly random slide, but I promise you it's not. It will come into the conversation later. But it's just talking about some generation gaps and key characteristics, right? And yeah, this is a hot topic, so it shouldn't be completely new or strange. And I don't have our Gen Alphas on there. You know they exist. They're just so little. We think we know what they're going to be, but we don't really know what they're going to be yet. But we've got boomers, Gen Xers, millennials, Gen Zs. All of us are existing in time and space together here. All of us are existing within the school district together. And y'all have the slide if you want to read it, right? But it's just important to think about some of these things that are, right? Like my mom, I don't call her on the telephone. It's like we are not communicating, right? But I'm a texter. And so I'm texting her all the time. I'm like, oh my gosh, and then I'll call her. I'm like, Mom, you're not responding to my text. She's like, what? She just needed to hear my voice. Right. And then I've got my Gen Z and Gen Alpha kids where, you know, I'll text them and I text them in sentences because that's just how I was raised. You write text in sentences and then I get okay or thumb up, right? Like, so there's these different generation communication. That's just communication, right? But then think about leadership differences, thinking about work expectations, right? And the reason I bring this up is just think about the school system. Think about the leaders in the school system. Think about the parents, but who are we actually representing and supporting and trying to build for? Right? So our little Gen Zers and our Gen Alphas. And it's just a place where we've got to, because look, I'm Gen X, man, we're right. I already know we're right. Like, that's just how it is. But I can't build a Gen X something and have my Gen Alpha love it. That's just not going to work for them, right? I got to take that hat off. So I just bring that up there because as you guys are looking through these standards, we will interpret them with our own lens, right? Well, of course somebody's going to be compliant and want to follow directions because I do. No, you know, if you talk to my little Gen Alpha, they need to understand exactly why or whatever, maybe just even arbitrary, or if you didn't put on social media, or it's not a TikTok challenge, it's not worth it. Anyway, so I just want you to think about those generational differences. I want you to translate them and think about them. Not just for the standards, but then also as you implement policy, right? As you're creating budgets and things and sitting in that governance seat, remembering that our people that we're really, really building for, which is why I love that you have a student representative so that you can remember and translate. Because this is a place where we go wrong, right? Because sometimes we build for ourselves and then we wonder why it didn't work. All right, so Cognia's performance standards. We have 31 standards. They are aligned to those universal best practices. We did that revision in 2022. They're focused in very much on how the institution is impacting the journey of the learner. Like I said, that is different from what it was before, where there were some things about like, you have a balanced budget and you have, you know, a supply list or just things that were more compliance based. This is much more on how do you know those things are working. And then it should be your launch pad for your aligned, focused district and school improvement. You guys have the standards, so you can read them at your leisure. The best way to summarize them, and this is important because this is how school systems are evaluating themselves. They do look at each individual standard, but you really need to be thinking about it holistically as a theme. And so there's 4 key characteristics. So there's culture of learning, right, which really is standards 1 through 6. Leadership for learning, which are standards 7 through 15. Engagement of learning, which is 16 through 23. And then growth in learning, which is standards 24 through 31. These kind of build on each other too, if you read through it. It's almost like a hierarchy of needs. Like you really need to start having some of these things, like if you don't have your culture in place or a vision for that, it's really hard, right, to start showing that growth and learning. And so these build on each other in a way that's very nice, and you can kind of find your prerequisites if you need to by working backwards. So we're gonna do a little activity though, because there is an entire standard that is based on the governing board, Standard 8. And so we're gonna do a little activity to kind of take you through the process that this team is going through so that you understand what does it mean to really think through, dissect the standard, reflect, and kind of take some steps for self-improvement. So if you look in your packet, if you can look at sort of a summary that's up there, or you can look at Standard 8. What you have here, we call this our performance standard cards. It gives you the key elements, some potential sample evidence. Remember, you can't just say what you want. You have to be able to show us how you know. And then the rubric that will be used to rate you. So I'm going to give you a minute to kind of read those. Then we'll do an activity. So what I want you to do is I want you to break into pairs, and you guys are you're already seated together. So I'll have you guys work in pairs, and I want you to look through the rubric. And I want you to just kind of talk about, if you have it and it's not binding, if you don't have access to evidence, but it's just sort of, where do you think you land on the rubric? What is some possible evidence that you would use to support that? All right, so I'm talking. All right, so you guys will also work in your pairs because we're gonna look at the rubric, determine where you can put
Really
it
well.
as a governing body, and
Yeah.
what evidence would you be able to show?
I don't not see that.
Yeah. Policies show that they're really you want to see them. Yes, for sure.
Policy plan.
But yeah, that does that.
That's very good. They're reviewing. They made it.
Yeah.
It wasn't scheduled to them, you know.
But, you know. I mean, no, yeah, you know, those first. Dictate whether it's. I mean, you could better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not just a survey with like. Yeah, it wasn't a survey. Oh, yeah. It might even be like, I think after we have the policy,
I think we just.
each individual cabinet takes it back to their individual about a group of people.
Survey
To
results.
put it into regulation or grading policy. Some minutes to show that, but I don't think
There's not a self-assessment.
No, I mean, yeah, so ours is self-assessment, but I
But
mean, we're asking other stakeholders.
show.
Right, so that was.
Yeah,
I was
that
trying to
was
think
here.
about. I know like. We
To show
that.
The effectiveness there of or where there's places to it.
That
And
was-
then they do get, I have a feeling about taking a survey.
But it's not
You get
necessarily
it, you know,
regarding
saying-
governing authorities.
No, right.
Thank you.
Right, so. I don't know when.
To me, it's not sure how you would ask that, but like, that's where I think probably biggest input on how. that's- Because, you know, parents. Before I was on this board, I really didn't care about the board. I cared about my kid getting it, right? Yeah, I'm curious. But obviously, like cabinet also is a statement, right? So there are some people that you could consider stakeholders that are actually knowledgeable enough to answer the question. But yeah,
Well, when I say just.
average parent is not gonna know.
About parents.
Yeah.
Community, other community members,
Students.
students,
Yeah.
business. But I don't think
We're using all.
But yeah,
those
no, I think
services, saying
pretty
what
comfortable.
now.
I feel. I'm certain. Yeah.
But I think that, I think that is discussed, I think that's a significant, particularly consider feedback side. Well, folks basically.
But I think that I was reading here.
Yeah.
Once-
And I think the state and national awards and recognition. So maybe you don't Georgia Vision Project, the question was.
But what I was reading here is that once something, a policy is that comes forward,
That's part.
do we even survey?
In order to, you have to have that training before you can apply for.
Yeah, yeah.
So we're just about.
You gotta get.
We will now, in the next.
It's not like your
To support that, so we needed to talk about that. Work.
And it's all, of course, under the veil and anonymity. They're gonna love this.
All right. So hopefully you've been able to come to some consensus. Remember, not binding and you don't have evidence in front of you. So this is really just your initial impression. What are you thinking over here, Carmen?
So. Were you wanting us to say, we gave ourselves between a 3 and a 4?
Okay, somewhere between a 3 and a 4.
And some of what we were discussing is that some evidence that we regularly review policies, so some evidence in that regard might be to go back and look at, pre-work and work minutes, where each policy goes through the policy revision process. We use the GSBA codes. You can see which one is discussed. We have the policy calendar, so policies come at a particular cadence, whether they're new or whether they're up for revision. So that might be some sample evidence. The only thing we talked about was uncompromised, so some policies have a little bit more weight than others. So some just sail through, and then some, and it's just probably the weight of the topic. And then some get a little bit more attention than others. The other thing we talked about when we were talking about this now was, and looking at sample evidence, was surveys. So for some policies, we do ask for survey feedback. It's usually community feedback, but we don't ask for feedback from cabinet members or maybe even the staff members who are charged with regulation of said policy. So is that something we should be doing? Should we be asking for feedback consistently before policies come up for that final vote? So that was just something we talked about. We handle survey surveys a little differently each time, not that it's good or bad, but it is worth noting that it's not consistent.
What about over here? What were you thinking?
So initially we were like, oh, we're a forum, we're doing all of these things. But then, I asked about the stakeholder survey results regarding the governing authorities collaboration. And I began questioning, when do we get that type of feedback from our stakeholders? And I think we agreed that we're not doing that consistently. We recently did that. But, outside of posting policies that we are reviewing and allowing for community feedback that way, we don't, I don't know that we solicited, feedback from our stakeholders about how we collaborate.
Yeah, and
Having said that, though, I mean, I still think we're a four. Not to put too fine a point on it, but of all of the forms of evidence, surveys are the weakest, right? I mean, survey data is just not great data. It's important input, but it is easily biased. And so I do think that we can do a better job of it without question. But I think we can do a better job of soliciting it and selectively ignoring it. I think that's important. And I still think we actually probably landed.
It's when you say that survey results are not good, qualitative or quantitative?
So I don't want to say that they are generally weaker than other forms of data, just given the ability to bias what comes in, both in the way a question is asked and in the knowledge of the individual responding. The reason why, if you get 50 answers to a survey question, you may not have legitimate statistical significance over whether or not that's answering the question in a way that could drive a decision, right? There's just surveys are sloppy. And de-sloppifying them requires a much higher amount of work than I think I would argue most school systems are capable of doing. And I'm not saying that they aren't worthwhile. I am saying that the survey is not the number one thing that I would look to in terms of, is it being successful or not, right? That student performance output information is much more important data source in my mind than what a parental survey says.
so I think it's a really interesting, and so this is all possible evidence, right? None of that is the required evidence, but we also ask you guys to triangulate. Because we understand perception data is absolutely imperfect because it's based on the perception of the person who's giving it to you. But people's perceptions are their reality, regardless of whether it matches my reality or not. So there is a benefit to knowing at least what people are thinking, because then I can respond, right? Am I having a communication problem here, or am I having, what's going on, right? And so then I can resolve it. So, yep, Jean, I'm sorry.
What I was gonna say is that possible evidence would be stakeholder survey results, but we also have two-way community dialogue
That's great.
feedback and two-way community meetings where that information, there's always a recorder, typically a Francis or an Eston of cabinet in the background, taking notes
Yeah.
so that we have record questions asked, things that we need to follow up on as far as administration is concerned. So where it's not a survey, we know that solicited feedback is authentic when we receive it in the community meeting. And some are definitely more lengthy than others as far as the amount of feedback we received. But over the past 2 years, I know that we have kept that. I mean, the two-way conversation was birthed out of a need to address an absence of a grading policy. And so that is where receiving that type of feedback from the community around the governing board's collaboration to create one, I think was very authentic, and it wasn't a survey result necessarily. Now, we subsequently have one on the grading, but it's not once again of the
Yeah.
grade, their authority, but it's what helped to produce it. So it's just, there's an additional bullet, I think, for us as a school system with the community meetings that could be listed here for the governing authority collaboration.
Yeah, and I think that that's great, right? And then you have something that you can say either, and here's something that we've then used to create a new system or process, or here's what we learned from it and here's what we're taking forward, right? It's a place to start. So yeah, that is all just possible evidence. And of course, there's other pieces. So I appreciate that you brought that up. So, I don't know where you guys are going to stand. We won't be able to know until we get the portfolio. Hopefully Amanda was listening and able to take some notes on types of evidence that could potentially be used. But this is what this team is going to do with every single one of the standards. They go through and do this type of self-reflection, and they need to come to consensus based on the evidence, based on what they've seen in order to do their evaluation. All right, did you guys have any questions about that, or even about the Standard 8 governing board? Okay, just know you're going to be part of that people will be talking about you. All right, so I'm a data person. Look, it's not even survey data, Hans. And so I always like to share a little bit of data because I think that you can look and reflect on things within yourself, but if you don't have a point of comparison or you don't see a big picture, sometimes it's a little bit harder to understand it. And so obviously you guys don't know what all of those standards are. You have it in front of you. You'll get the slide. Should you be one of those people who needs to go through and process this whole thing, you can. But I've kind of blocked it out for you that we just looking at our network averages, this is really only the United States. This isn't the global, it's just the United States. Looking at where the highest rated standards were, we find that they were in culture and leadership, right? So standard 2, 1, 8, 11, and 4 were consistently rated the highest. And then the places where we're seeing the lowest ratings are standard 25, 29, 17, 26, and 22, which are in engagement and growth. I just point that out because should you guys get your report back and you see something similar, know that that's a national trend. That's not just necessarily Decatur. If you see something different, great. But I just wanted you to put it there. And I just wanted to maybe put it there like why? Why might that be such a strong trend? What do you think?
So looking at so for example, standard 26, which says leaders regularly evaluate instructional programs and organizational conditions to improve instruction and advance learning. If there's any experience that I have on the board, it's that teachers hate it when stuff is changing. When things are kind of constantly evolving and changing, that is not beloved at a teacher level. And so that's hard to do, like committing the system to constantly make those changes when you have a low grade, and sometimes I imagine probably not even low grade resistance from the people who are actually boots on the ground implementing those changes in the classroom. I can imagine it's a nightmare. It's very difficult to you're not because that standard isn't talking about making changes to the instruction. That standard is talking about continuously making changes. And yeah, I would just say that my experience in the schools would be that that's very difficult to drive down at a teacher level.
But I mean, I could push my back on you as a practitioner and say, honestly, that kind of is my job as a teacher, right? Should I not be continuously assessing what I'm doing? And not Amanda, not Gima coming in and telling me what to do. Me, myself, having my own accountability and responding to my students.
I don't disagree at all. I don't think any of us would disagree. I think that what you hear from a collection of
I know,
teachers
I
is
hear
different,
you.
right?
Absolutely. And teacher, there's a reality, right, that you're dealing with, and then there's an ideal state. And somewhere between, right, is where we're continuously trying to get to. But I think that there's ways to interpret the standards, and it's important to really look at what is it asking behaviorally to have happen, right? And what's the evidence for that? So yeah, so part of it can be that sometimes it's hard to change, right? And so if there's a standard calling for change, we just know we have a natural challenge there. What else?
I was thinking about kind of maybe the interconnectivity between some of the standards, because earlier when you mentioned opportunities for learning
Yeah,
and the importance of that, and so if we're providing opportunities for teachers, like I was looking at Leaders Promote Action Research, I don't know how we're doing that unless a teacher is in a program. But, you know, I was just thinking as I've been, you know, going through different programs and always learning something new about teaching and the practice and everything. And I'm like, man, for folks who haven't been in school for a long, like Decatur has a lot of teachers who've been here for many years.
Yeah.
I think there's a huge benefit to that. But a lot of them haven't done any more outside of maybe short trainings that are offered. There's so much research that they're missing out on about, you know, new practices. And so that, I think that could influence that, but we hold some responsibility for that also in terms of, you know, how we share, you know, what was coming out of this new research.
yeah,
I think these standards over here look more like cultural practice to me, so you could probably look at, kind of the strategic plan, you could kind of look at, maybe standard-based practice, that sort of thing, and be able to prove that. But these look like kind of where classroom rubber meets the road here, and even like looking at standard 26, to get to 4 leaders consistently implement a documented process to determine the effectiveness of an institution's curriculum. So if you don't have that and you don't have the data to prove it, you're probably not getting to a 4. So I could see where some of these standards just may be, or maybe harder for some superintendents of teaching and learning to have that data to not only prove that those standards exist, but they're effective. So how it impacts budget, if boards don't have the budgets to have those curricula in place and in practice long enough to see some substantive change, they're probably not going to get to a 4.
yeah. No, and that's really insightful because that is so true, right? Some of this evidence that's asked for some of these other standards are big documents that are publicly available. You can just say, here's our policies and procedures manual, here's a schedule, right? But when you're talking about student growth for all learners, right? Like that level or a systematic process that's being implemented in every classroom, yeah, you're getting at something that's a little bit more challenging and probably takes more time, right? Because you're changing behaviors and practices across an entire district. And so it just takes more time. And so I think that that's really good. And I think that some of these also, when I think about engagement and growth, the pandemic truly did impact the learners. We know this, they impacted the teachers. And so there are some kids, right, that are still unfortunately trying to catch up from what they missed. And so I think that it's a lot easier to say, let's change our leadership behaviors because the leaders are immediately under control in the school district. But to actually have the impact on the kids just takes a little bit longer, and it's trying to figure out what they need to see those results. So I love that. All right, any more questions or thoughts on policy and budget as it relates to the standards? Okay. All right, so I'm going to move through really quickly just so that you know there's an assurances that needs to be checked. The school district team will do that. The only thing that would really apply to you guys, just so you know, is that making sure that the budget has been audited by an external source, which is not a problem for public school systems. And then, so you know that what comes next. Your engagement review report arrives 60 to 90 days after the engagement review has been completed. It has narratives, ratings, and then next steps for improvement that goes to Amanda and to Jima. And then she will share with you. And then I have to say this because obviously I can't predetermine what would happen here. It would be possible recognition as an accredited institution. Just know that Decatur's been accredited since 1931. Okay. This is what the report looks like. just so that you can see it, right? It gives you each of the standards. It tells you what your rating is. It will tell you the network average so that you can compare that. It gives you the standards, again, clustered into themes so that you don't have to take action on an individual standard. You can see a theme that has emerged based on your evidence and ratings for improvement, and also areas of noteworthy practices. And then you get a final score. The score in itself is not necessarily important, other than if you are above 200, then you are scoring in the accredited range. All right, any questions on that? All right, policies and procedures. We always ask our teams to review that. If you need to see it, let us know and we'll make sure that you get a copy. This is really just our cycle of improvement, just so that you know, City Schools of Decatur will do a mid-cycle progress report in year 4 of their continuous improvement cycle, which for them is going to be the 28-29 school year, which feels just so far in the future, but it's really not. And really that's it. The promise of continuous improvement, right, is that we are able to embed that change and really impact our kids. This is what gets me out of bed in the morning, the kids, and this profound belief that no matter how high performing and amazing a school district is, we always have those opportunities to improve. And I love the educators that are committed to that every day, and thank them for their service. Just remembering some key things about what continuous improvement is. And the key words here are sustained and systematic and systemic. And then to just make sure that I have brought it home to you, remember, y'all are advocating for all kids. I want you to remember that. You need to collaborate with the superintendent. We're not micromanaging, respecting the difference between setting the conditions and expectations, right, and implementing the solution. Let's let the practitioners implement and identify the solutions. You can talk to the superintendent about the results that you're seeing and ask your questions. Monitoring outcomes, so make sure you're asking those questions. Please advise the stakeholders of the continuous improvement efforts and actions. It's one thing for school district staff to speak up, but when the board speaks and is speaking on behalf of the school district and saying, yes, the things that are happening here are the right things, that matters. And then hold yourselves accountable. These results don't just lie with the school district staff. You guys are setting the conditions. So the policies and the budget, and making sure that the right leaders are in place. So these are some self-reflection and discussion questions. This is a little bit abbreviated, and I know that I am standing between you and lunch. So we're going to take this, you know how sometimes we have to flip the classroom. Y'all have these questions. I'm going to let you take them home, but I would ask you, in the spirit of your own continuous improvement, to really think about them and just see if there's some things here, right? Some behaviors that might want to change, or some pieces of evidence that you could change, or key takeaways, right? Thank you. And then this is really important too. I believe in feedback, and Cabinet, if you want to join in, you may, but I'm going to ask the board. It is going to be anonymous, so I won't know who you are. I will ask for you to please give me some feedback. It is a very short survey, but that is one of the strangest things about working with Cognia and being outside of a school system, is normally I had a bunch of peers who could give me feedback immediately, and I don't anymore. So without you, I never get feedback and I can never change or improve. So please do that for me. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate your service. I appreciate the work you do for City Schools of Decatur. And did everybody get that QR code?
Yes.
Okay, because if not, we're gonna get the slides. You can do it later, but nobody ever does it later. So you should do it now. And then my contact information is on here as well if you need it. All right, are there any questions? Everybody's really ready for lunch. Hans desperately needs caffeine or coffee of some sort. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
All right, team, I see lunch right up there. So we're gonna go ahead and do our survey and also grab our lunch. And then of course it'll be some working, but I'll let you do. These categories.
Okay.
Yeah, everybody does. I mean, people still say, and then this is Emily from Saks. I'm like, sure.
Could Cognia just buy up Saks? Cause I'll do.
So Saks joined in, I can't remember what there are a couple of different names, but really they, what happened is Advanced Ed and Measured Progress, an investment company, merged, and they then decided together their boards that we need a brand new name, so it's a big Cognia. I guess because nobody could give us the name.
Yeah.
You know, lawyers, negotiations, whatever that is.
Cognia sounds a lot newer. I like Saks.
So you know Saks. Saks will be here. Saks will be, and then, I mean, I had the binders.
High school, someone from Saks came to walk, no, when I called.
And jump back in and move to the next part of the agenda, which is really around strategic plan updates. So if you remember back at the last retreat, this was the agenda item we didn't quite get to. So here it is today, and it really works out perfectly because as we're talking with that Cognia kind of background that we just got around continuous improvement, we know that our strategic plan is leading our work, and today's an opportunity for us to talk about kind of where we are with our progress on the strategic plan so far. So that's the goal. We're going to be giving updates on where we are. Really, nothing should be terribly surprising. We did ask you to take a look for pre-work at those executive summary, we call them the executive summary one-pagers, that has each of the 16 objectives outlined and provides you some information on each of them. So we'll be doing an activity with those in just a little bit, but hopefully you got a chance to look over them and begin to think a little bit about what you noticed or any questions that you had around them so that when you engage with cabinet, you can ask those questions today. But those executive summaries all kind of summarize the high-level highlights for each of those strategic plan objectives for you. And they help us in monitoring, they identify what the KPI or any progress indicators are. And they help us know what the major milestones are for each of the objectives so that we're aware, so that of course we can make sure that we're on track and then manage expectations and risks and celebrate achievements as we mark off those milestones as well. So that's what we're going to be working on today, and we're going to have an opportunity to gain input from you all through some rotations so that we can take it to the next level or make any revisions or additions through discussion at the end as well. All right, so just this should be familiar again, but just kind of frame us where we are today. So you all created All Indicator, the strategic plan back in the 22-23 school year. We know that there was a lot of community input, surveys, that it was a process that was done. So that's helped inform all of our objectives. Last year, time flies, in the 23-24 school year, we did some work in board retreats as well around refining some of those objectives. So those 4 strategic accelerators have been in place. We did a little bit of tweaking around the objectives that were underneath each of them so that there are 4. We called it the 4x4 for a little bit. That's how we got to the 16 objectives that we have now. And we also worked through the key performance indicators. So if you remember, we did some work around that and those got published. They're visible in Assembly. All of that took place last year. As well as last year, we rolled out the BMOC, Board Management Oversight, right? That helps align each of our strategic accelerators and when they're covered at each of the board meetings through the various presentations. So in teacher language, the scope and sequence of when we're presenting different things and how those align to each of the objectives. So then really every board meeting's a little bit of an update on one part of the strategic plan or more. So here we are this year. This year, we have developed that executive summary that has been shared with you, and it helps us plan those key milestones for success. So we know that the strategic plan takes us through 2028. So what are the key milestones that we would expect to see this year or in future years so that we're achieving the objective by in the life of the strategic plan? And then so next year, we're going to continue to execute these priorities and continue to manage the risks and celebrate achievements as we go on through this as well. So just kind of framing where we've been, where we are, and where we're going from a timeline perspective. All right. So just to frame it again, you're familiar with the all indicator strategic plan. This is just showing some of the work that's been done, the accelerators and the 4 objectives underneath each. Again, reminding that the KPIs, one of the things we've done is we've leveraged Simbly to load the KPIs and to monitor them publicly with our lagging indicators there so that we know kind of what's in place. All that is available. And then this is, I already spoke about it, but the board management oversight plan, where of course we can see the strategic accelerators and the updates that help address the objectives that live in each of those. Also exciting in the June board meeting, we'll be looking at the 25-26 BMOP so we can see how it's looking, where we might need to add things so that we're getting the updates that we need on each of these objectives. All right. So you all have for you an executive summary for each of the strategic plan objectives. All right. Again, hopefully you looked at that. So this is one of the great things that we've put into place as we're rolling out in Dr. Whitaker's 90-day plan. Some of the work that we talked about was building project management and change management skills. So this is one of the pieces and tools that we are working with and building the capacity around our leaders with as well. But it's a concise summary of our project's proposals and the most important information. So you'll find the high level information there, some budget information there. You find the KPIs and major milestones there as well. So kind of that high level overview, which is an important piece. So that's what we're using. So it helps us understand a project before you review the full project plan or all the details, right? As you get into all the things that make that up, it's more that high level. So that is what you have here and some of the different components that I just ran through really fast so that we can have some rich discussion. But that is what you have in front of you today. All right, so what we're going to do is you have this in front of you. We're going to engage in a little bit of speed dating is not the right word, but rotations, right? To engage with the owners of each of the different strategic plans. So for example, Adina and Lonita will be paired together and they will be covering the strategic plan objectives that kind of they own. You have this cover sheet with you as well. And it will give you a chance to engage with them. If you were able to fill out your pre-work, they were grouped together as well, so you could capture thoughts there. So you'll be able to engage with them to provide feedback, ask questions, just kind of that back and forth as you're thinking about that. So we have 5 different groups. My cabinet members, just so you are aware, obviously, Nia reached out this morning. She had a summative, so she's not able to be here. So you will have one break in the rotation to catch your breath. So are we ready to go? So if my cabinet members, if you'll find your area around the room first, it goes around starting 1 and then it cycles around. Katisha is going to be my timekeeper. We're going to have 6 minutes in each group.
Cabinet members, when it's time for Dr. Sultan, so first, Adina and Lonita come to.
Perfect.
When you have Dr. Sultan.
Great. All right. And then board members, you can find out your round 1. So you're going down to see who you are with first. And it's also in your packets. get on my other list. Did everyone find their home?
All right. I think we're all set. So and start round one. First question was for these like. So.
Yeah.
Like, so there's no vacation, like I didn't break down this. Rather than like. The other is, Life particularly what has here in the the spikes are consolidated as we go from month to month. That I think I like that. District leaders. The way we're bringing that down to yeah, I would say let's make sure that we're and then yes, that you're right, that's what I mentioned. Excited about it. I am on one hand excited, but I'm also the other hand wishing that we respond to really excited about what's happening. That was last year. Yeah. And Salesforce. But that's what I'm not sure. Coach Sharps. What is the right?
Areas where some departments are clearly budgeting. About 2 minutes remaining for this round. Yeah. Yeah. I think maybe we can get this finance here. I think the board wants to hear where those surpluses are. Figure out where because I think majority here we have this kind of stuff rolling over. It starts to just as fundamental. Maggie was she was superintendent. She didn't have school meetings, she was.
Yeah.
But
I have one more minute. Thirty more seconds. All right. I invite you to thank your presenter. And we're ready to rotate.
We invite you. And now we rotate.
Thank you, Dr. Teacher boy.
They just know.
Riz, it's familiar.
It's a familiar.
Awesome.
You're up.
You know where you're gonna come to you. Yep. All right, so we will start our 6 minutes if we're ready. Did we rotate? You need one? Here, have this one. You need one too, Jay? It's Maria. Maria.
Hello.
Yeah, please. Who's
Me. Yeah.
Me.
Yeah, the board.
And I hope the board here is blank from this.
Well, I want them to really know how diligent we are to make sure that we are competitive within the market. And outside structural elements and, you know, you compare.
Yeah.
Because but I also know that we are the leader of our lifestyle. Very different with all the other instructors. And then just really just take advantage of the situation that jobs are in the now that we've got no other issues are iterated. We're able to gain a little bit more footing, take a little bit more control. But we can't keep operating like exactly. Not with state responsibility.
Giving us
Maybe. Other than that, probably not. I've shared with you that I recently came by just when we don't have. But
I don't really understand the narrative around it. Most districts don't even keep it. It's where catastrophic illness.
Yeah.
Not just somebody that's going particularly because you had a baby or just wearing a surgery or something like that. It is catastrophic.
It is.
In most districts, they don't even touch it. They don't even touch it, you know? Okay.
One, I think it's the active place. This falls into that, like, I'll look at them, look at them take, take us. And I can't verify that, but I have a couple of teachers that ran out of suppliers and stuff like that. Now, this is not the intended purpose of it. Realize we didn't have.
Yeah,
But also,
yeah.
and maybe something that's there and never gets used. That's like that.
Yeah.
My second is when you read some stuff about teachers. That's the only narrative here. Some have to say.
Yeah.
Our teachers. Or I mean, the hope is that like make them more diverse. That's for 4 years.
That is what the main thing about what I think is like the 2000 life insurance. What is the one of our employees?
Yeah. My private.
Stop it, and they had changed their I mean, they're didn't even realize, so their spouse like.
That is automatic.
Yeah, and so we're like, why don't we have easy life insurance? Exactly, and so if you got them already as a board, even at 78, 26, you found a way that it would be conflict, and they're often, that's where that came
I think it's great. I think little small.
Not sustainable.
No, not at the rate I did. You did that multi-year. That
Multi-years without, I think, starting to change the way we know. Someone thinks me, it's like, oh, you know, like 12%. They're all gonna get it more than because they're all also.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm like, it's like, you know.
And it's the minimum of 4%, so you're right, they all.
What is the? What's the biggest financial concern?
You know, we're gonna have some kids who's not paid in the district, so we have to pay that out of that. You know, we can have like, okay, it really depend on. So that's my concern, and then even with the economy and the direction that's going in, I'm concerned about the time.
Just think out loud.
Yeah, back. That's the part we forget, right? Yeah, back. It may cost you a little, it may cost you a lot.
Rates are a lot higher than they were. Last time.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. What can that work do?
I guess because although we're using capital funds, we use general funds to maintain it. You know, the staff bed, pay utilities, so that's, I mean, it's hard to increase salaries, that's gonna cut into that. Because we all know that's the biggest portion of the budget.
Yeah, once the buildings are built.
Right.
Like Westchester is expensive to keep up.
Right. Mhm.
And 30% means well, then because my focus is, yeah. Strategy is place, but I need to change. And then there's some important initiatives that I'm putting in place to keep them, knowing that we're looking forward into them and they're gonna have to be in our, you don't have to go outside and take the grass. Then that's
So it's-
You know, it's my job.
you know,
Good Lord, yes. All right, I invite you to thank your presenters and we're ready to rotate and you'll come to this space. Yep.
Right, so.
You doing me good?
Do you prefer to sit?
I invite you to thank their presenter.
I love it. You know, it's one of those things that's comfortable. Yeah, I can dress it up and dress it down. Y'all come. Y'all had questions?
You're coming to Dr. Sultan.
Okay.
Yeah, no, you're coming to Dr. Sultan. That's correct. Yeah, they're just wrapping up their last. Great. Come on down. Everybody ready? We'll start our timer.
Okay. Take us off. On my page here. We're on 4A.
4A is budgeting and all the threes like HR.
Okay.
Questions, concerns, suggestions.
So I was just telling Jarvis this, and I'll tell you this as well. So I think the biggest thing in front of us this next year is that the bogey on the early childhood learning center. How much do you need? And understanding how much of it is gonna come out of some sort of bond-like structure, that how much of it is gonna come from appropriations or whatever, how much of it is gonna come from blah, 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 right? So that's sort of Pareto of what each of the buckets are, and then what you need from us, right? Because that obviously there's a communication that I think from my national. So Jarvis is telling me about breaking ground on the center. I'm like, I want to know how much it's gonna cost.
You have both.
That's a big piece. The other one, which I heard of was hitting, Kristen about, is just the point at which y'all's data systems tighten up, because that is going to clean our budget again.
Yeah.
Right. And so,
Absolutely.
being able to have that, I guess, so when are you anticipating? When are you guys anticipating being able to talk to each other?
Right, exactly.
That's what I'm saying.
And get position numbers.
Yeah.
So the solicitation posted.
Yeah.
Solicitation posted yesterday. And so by the end of the year, we hope to have a collection to bring to the board.
By the end of this year, or by.
Mhm. By the end of this year, by December. Right.
Okay, so, oh, I see, the calendar.
Yeah.
not the fiscal year.
Yeah.
All right, so then I would like to see a KPI around y'all's integration.
Okay.
Right, so when is that? Like the date, are we on track? So that's where we can have some comfort that that's in the process.
Right.
Maybe that's basically what you have, number 13,
Right,
but
right.
having it updated to include. All right. And then the HR ones. Walk me through those.
So you tell me what, yeah, we were talking about the salaries, the raise.
Yeah, so one of the things, let me make sure that I'm in the right place. Yeah, so, this is equally all in, I think, communication, that's not, I think it's important. James's comment, right, gone in for 5 years. Entry level teachers. Right, and so I want to get us out of this defensively responding to people accusing us of things and more proactively communicate about what we're actually doing. So that discussion of what we've done with teacher pay, full compensation, we don't have a raise pay teachers. We have some of the highest total compensation is very, very, very salary basis compensation. And you'll continue to make this. I think that needs to be. Yeah, it's not just the KPI. I think that's just the proactive communication that you're using, not just to our community, but talking to people that you're with. I should be just like nine when you're working with and obviously you're going to communicate to young emerging teachers slightly differently than to talk to the total community, but having that is, I think, kind of.
I always say, narrative, we are truly invested.
Yeah.
If we're gonna listen, we're gonna listen.
Yeah.
And we're catering to that middle of the road that, you know, that 12 to 15 years, we gotta really, you know, retain those, you know, these people, and then
Yeah.
keep it on the lead.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I get exactly.
But that's, so let's get that into a KPI, like when we say competitive salary, what do we need in terms of? When we say retention, what do we need?
Okay.
There should be a KPI. Different points, you would be like, we have 98%. I think that's it, that's.
Anything that you think that we, and I receive everything, you just said, anything else that you think that we can.
Less than a minute, thank you.
For us, I can't move without the money, she be able to put up people.
Well, I mean, so the hobby horse that I climb on every year is about that, like, we know there is always going to be a number of a percentage of a.
Yeah.
You may not know specifically what your positions are, but you know you're gonna experience attrition.
Right.
It's just that's gonna be the natural. And so we should not be budgeting
If there's any.
the full amount for all of the positions.
Yeah.
If we know that some of those are gonna be vacant for a period of time. And so we can go back in the data and say roughly what we experience each year in terms of.
All right.
And so I can prove that.
I invite you to thank your presenters,
You're gonna adjust because you don't know which. one you're gonna-
and we're ready to rotate.
But you know you're not gonna, so that tighter
Like
collaboration.
we did kind of a midterm,
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
instead of increasing the budget. Yeah, we don't have to pay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Round 4.
Board member Lutz was the first one to get up.
Run the finance.
Anita and Monica.
That's PBIS.
Thank you. That was funny.
How are you? You got budget and finance.
We're in the home stretch.
Would you have any
Start our
questions?
6 minutes now.
I presented enough in front of you. Very thorough, very thorough.
But Sarah, I said, when you have captain that we can put pretty much verbatim, say what you said, we heard it.
Yeah, I'm like, y'all wanna hear anything else?
If we see something, say,
Right, yeah. And then, yep, so what about, like, with the salary? So far, we've been doing pretty good, but like I was talking to Adina, we can't continue to give those type of increases, we won't be able to do that, so we gotta kind of bring it down. So when you say bring it down, you got some ideas about what that is? Right now, I would say no higher than 3%. Yeah, and we've been outpacing the other issues. And this is a good year to just gain some money and that competitiveness. Yeah, we know nobody else is doing anything, but we also have to realize. We can't be number one. We can't compete with it. You know, who was gonna be in the top, and maybe here. Why break the bank? When we need to really mark ourselves as an issue, really always, you know, everyone that you get negative, so what else you gonna work for that.
Yeah.
You know, not that they're not working, but and so about like staff, because I know that eventually when we start out, and we're lower than. I think we called up, we're still lower again, we're not gonna be number one. Right. But, I think. And I would say this issue was a very good. Okay. Because that was the main thing, because if you touched on it, they were our principals and our leaders. They were really like, okay, we're gonna be a principal, we need to at least be committed with somebody that's right side.
Yeah.
Then having the director and I mean, they just gave,
you don't need a standing ovation.
almost, and So I think that hit really key because that's the middle management you need.
Yeah.
You need those people. And then I think the next thing, the next year, I think we really need to think about special, you know, what's that as far as our school nutrition, college driver, and all that. And I would say that's the way that you guys gave. This, you know, they like, they
Very happy. They're very well deserved. Yeah. Especially on special education.
you know, school and teachers down,
What are
offer reasons.
I mean, yeah, but you know, community, of course, they hate when anything outside of the class. But you definitely need to bring them because they don't understand how important positions are until they're not there. Exactly. Exactly.
But I was because, you know, I'm been with community, I mean, social, my neighbors.
Yeah.
And talk about their kids, and so, you know, they'll also.
About 2 minutes remaining.
You know, seriously, that's me, I say, right now.
Sometimes they get against each other. But you do have to take consideration. Hear that.
Well, I'm.
You know, it's like, I don't know, what's so good. Because of the constant presentation and feedback that we didn't get. I mean, having to go back and redo, you know, A and B.
Yeah, that's true. My friend be like, no.
And so it's very
It has, yeah.
30 seconds.
I agree with you 100%. And the most transparent.
Yeah.
With over 100 feedback something.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I appreciate
Yeah. I mean, we have to motivate each other sometimes, don't we? Hold on, you think I'm thinking out.
And I love to say that.
All right. We are in the home stretch. Yes. First up. Yeah, round five. The final round. What is it? All right.
Wait, we gotta put this back.
It's right here. It's right here. I got it. Got it. No problem. All right, final round. Yeah, this is your break. Okay.
All right, I mean, he's loved to pay for this, yeah. Well, I think Great question.
So my experience has always been, the school takes care of safety, it's necessary to participate. Yeah, I'm gonna show you. Here's what you say, this nature. Parents, who's going to take care of the students? So, going to UGA homecoming, Martin Luther King, things that are nice to do. So that's what it is in school. But the more people say, the school government's had to do reconditioning everything. As technology advances around the country, they have to be, standards. So you look at genomics, right? And so that is that's expensive. To resurface those things you got to the end of the year, that's a clean, background tag, and it's this thing that you take, it's not quite, right? So the reconditions are almost complete. Technology, concussion technology is something, and you won't, it's hard, not like the hospital. Upgrade, say, don't upgrade, you don't really get three. But it's scared, it's hurt. You don't want to live with that first, they into the district.
Yeah.
So those are big costs that pop up every 3 years, every 2 years, every 4 years. But that's what we school. That's what we school. So if they want to go to play a school in Florida, we can have a sanction for it because it is a game or an extension. So there's some collaboration that will take place, but that can't be.
About 2 minutes remaining.
Yeah, we want to go to October to Florida Classic. It doesn't work. That's my thing.
Our next batch of public meeting that goes out at the end of this week on Monday. Also be having a start. This also gets into some. Each one of these. How to use the app.
And then we'll, something like that, then we could add this all the time, parents, people to see when they do that.
About 20 more seconds. All right, we made it. I invite you to thank your presenters.
No, I'm totally fine, as long as I'm sitting here, I'm fine. Getting up.
Rubric was very clear, standing up first.
That's not fair.
Not fair.
All right.
Talk to the instructor.
You did not have enough time. Am I right?
No, I didn't say that.
Mm.
It's all perfect.
Oh, wow. So. What? So now that we've had about an hour to engage with our strategic plan, what ideas, what questions do you have about the strat plan? All in. Yes, yes.
I've had 2 Cokes, I'm very hyper right now. So one good discussion that came out of teaching and learning was talking about the KPI, the concept of the KPI itself, right? And so my feedback there that I think should go to everybody, not just teaching and learning, is don't allow the KPI to drive what you look at. Always question the KPI itself, right? Like, so where it came up in the context of that was, when we're looking at subgroup performance, if we're looking at African-American and economically disadvantaged students, we don't have anything in that about students with disabilities. We don't have anything in that about other subgroups. And so the question is, should we? We should always be looking and allow the problem to drive the KPI. Do not allow the KPI to limit the way you look at the problem, right? And I think that's kind of important.
Other things?
Dr. Broom and Ms. Walker and I talked about the KPI of retaining teachers, and that maybe we could focus a lot on salary and how sustainable that is over time, like continuing to offer percent raises of 3% or and ultimately what that's going to do to the mill rate of the budget. And is it really necessary? Are we really losing teachers because of salary? Are we using them for larger districts in the salary? The sole drivers at the end, we talked about ways to, along the vein of talking about salary, think about how to not only retain teachers, but recruit new teachers.
Right.
With salary only being one focus.
Because we may be missing something, or just thinking that every year, we're gonna keep on raising our salaries and we're continuing to retain teachers. and Maybe that part is done, and look at some other things.
I think that survey data around, why do you stay? That question. And using that also, it's not only why'd you leave on the exit survey, but why'd you stay when you stayed?
Yeah.
And really taking that data and looking at it.
I like that way of thinking though, because what you're basically saying is use the KPI, use the strategic objective to accomplish a concrete goal. But once you have accomplished that concrete, like know what that concrete goal is that you're accomplishing, so that you also know when to stop doing it, right? And that I think is important.
Well, along those lines, they also shared with me about, we may not be able to sustain given the raises that we have to teachers, this year. But looking at, I'm hoping that, we will be able to look at some other folks, like our nutrition workers, and trying to kind of bring them up.
Continue the treatment.
Yeah,
I love it.
Hey, some takeaways and thoughts about the SEL programming that we're doing. It just, it's so important and it's so hard to teach and measure. But man, there's probably nothing more important than making sure our kids are
Future ready.
emotionally happy and sustained, but like, so just looking for more KPIs that measure, not just that we're doing something, but that as we continue to grow and use it, what we're doing has been working.
and I would so say, Francis's excitement around it was enough for me,
Yeah.
Like it just felt so genuine, like that was so encouraging.
Yeah. This has definitely been her baby this year. Yes. And she's ready to give birth to something in the fall. Like everyone has heard about it. Like even the students you saw on Tuesday talked about it. Like we talked about the standards for social emotional learning. Yes, everyone has. Awesome.
So we talked about mental health and whether, there's the perception that we don't have enough coverage for mental health. And the conversation was around perception versus reality. It sounds like we do have enough coverage for the kids that are coming into the student center, but we talked a lot about how to forecast what the actual means. So taking a look at the best data, how many of the kids are registering as high,
Elevated.
high risk. Of those kids that are high risk, how many are, what percentage of them are actually receiving mental health support services from us? And using that as a forecast of demand, right? If 4% of them or 2% of them are receiving services, then we probably have work that we need to do to reach the other kids. If 90% of them are receiving mental health services, then we actually probably have done the work to meet them. And so that, take that back to the question about KPIs, how can you frame a measurement methodology that identifies whether or not there's a problem?
Awesome. Oh, yes. So what are our next steps? One, thank you so much for engaging in today's discussions. I was excited to just see you all interacting with them as well, because they genuinely have a lot of knowledge, and you talked about that in their subject matter expertise even earlier today. So all of us will incorporate all of your feedback into the templates. They say draft because we are going to ultimately post them, but we want to incorporate the things that you've said. We will continue to monitor the progress and report on the KPIs. So when we talk about our BMOP in June at pre-work, this is where strategic plan updates embedded in each one of our board retreats. That's where it's going to go, and based upon the release of said data. So say, for example, CCRPI, that's one of our KPIs. Well, I can't update the CCRPI information right now because I don't have it. But once we do have it, we'll update it on the website, but then to do the deep dive in the data in the retreat. And then identify what we need to say. Where are the strategies that are working? What are some risks that you see, risks that you're hearing, and build so that it would be sustainable. We are 2 years into a 5-year strategic plan. We know it's not a plan that sits on the shelf. As you know, we have that 4 strategic accelerator side in every presentation. And we do it even internally at ad staff because we want everyone to know where their work is tied. Give me one more second and then explore the opportunities to engage our stakeholders. You all know that I talk to the advisory councils, I do the council corner and the points of in the communication that you get. So you know what's emerging and they also know it's tied to the strategic plan. But the celebrations are key. You heard Dr. Klein talked about it earlier today around when the accreditation comes. It's not yay, great, or, you know, but you celebrate it because it's the work. Yes.
So I think the first question I was gonna ask is if this is the time you want me to make the request.
Yes, please do.
But I did want to make a comment about the celebrating achievements. I'm really glad that's up there because I think there was speaking for myself, but I do suspect my fellow board members thought this, that as you came on, there were some really, really substantive issues that had to be addressed across the system. And even as you dug into it, they were larger than we thought. And I think we have actually been successful at moving the needle on a number of those. And I would say it's time to start telling the community, right? Like, look at what we've done for literacy, and you can see the change. Look at what we've done for, this focus on economically disadvantaged children. And look at how many, I would love to start having a conversation with them.
Yes.
But what I would like to ask of my fellow board members, so this came up when we were talking about CIS. And I know we talked a little bit about return on investment. Those are the metrics that we're tracking, but I really think in the spirit of being student outcome oriented, I would like to request that we get the performance data pre-CIS. We know the subset of kids that are being helped by CIS. What was their discipline data and performance characteristics pre-CIS? And after CIS's engagement, what is the discipline data and student performance? Because if we aren't moving the needle on those two things, then what really is CIS doing?
Yeah, and that's also part of the contract as well. So we will make sure that you have it. So we'll provide it.
Just want to make sure that y'all are okay with requesting that, and directing the administration to provide that. Does that make sense?
It does. I don't want community members to make the assumption that we are tying community schools to discipline. I mean, some of these kids may not have discipline issues at all.
Sure.
Yeah, understood.
Because I'm trying to figure out what's the, why CIS and why that question?
Well, because we're spending money with CIS, right? And so we want, if we're gonna hold CIS accountable, right? We're paying them for a service. What is it that we expect in return for that service? I would expect that the kids that they're serving are doing better somehow, right? I mean, and maybe it's not discipline. So I kind of see your point on discipline. That's probably a good call, but like certainly like attendance maybe, or like are those kids that they're helping able to show up in the schools more often because CIS is providing this? Are they able to stay focused on their own education and learning because CIS? Because if they're not, if there's no impact whatsoever in the classroom or in the kids' performance, then the question does have to come up. Well, should we keep paying CIS for that service? Because it doesn't seem to be making an impact.
So I guess I would want some clarity on what are the goals of CIS
Exactly.
and what, because we've only had it for like 1 year.
We've had, exactly.
So like, I think about PBIS, like you need at least 5 years to see some results with PBIS. So I'm wondering like what what the expectation is around CIS and.
Yeah.
Mrs. Holt?
Yeah, so in the contract that we had and that we have now going forward into next year, the school-wide indicators for those school-wide services are to increase graduation rate at the high school, reduce dropout rates, reduce in-school and out-of-school for the students that have those concerns, and improve attendance. For the students that receive the case management support, we have 70% will improve behavior as measured by the number of ISS or OSS days. 70% will meet academic improvement goals, increase the graduation rate for our Black students or economically disadvantaged by 3%. And then for literacy, increase by 5%, percentage of Black students and economically disadvantaged, meeting the literacy indicators.
And that happened, so I mean, I agree with Jana, that's not reasonable for 1 year, like, that's not gonna happen in 1 year, but what's the length of time that we anticipate that requiring?
So some of that data we don't have yet. So like,
Yeah.
as the data becomes available, just like I said with the strategic plan, as the data becomes available, we can give, and for our communities and schools caseload, this is what it is. I mean, when we disaggregate data, we do it based upon subgroup. And we can make sure that information is gathered, but
But like to meet those goals, when are they saying that those goals should be met?
Well, they do send us an annual report at the end of the year, so we look at that. Now, obviously, last year, with them starting in March or late March, we really can do that, but at the end of this year, we'll get one, and then that'll be in the report that I do. Whenever you guys review and approve that BMOP plan, that'll be part of the report.
so part of it,
Expected in 1 year.
so you would need to, for that data, the CCRPI, those sorts of things, grad rate, you're not gonna find that out till like October, November. So we can't give you what their version is until then.
We understand that, I think we're asking, are we whenever we have it all compiled,
Will you? get-
are we anticipating CIS will have been able to make that 70% improvement within 1 year? Or are we expecting it to be a couple of years?
I would say the program we are with is on the 2.5-year program, very similar to the UVA program.
Okay.
Will you get gains? Yes. Will you meet all those targets in 1 year? No, not when you're doing any type of input.
So
2.5
at
year.
the end of the 2 year, whatever the contract.
2.5 year
is, we'll
window.
Have had that, and so.
But
then-
we can tell you the progress made as a result of 1 year.
Sure, of course, and when do we anticipate that? Because I think then just that report is all I'm suggesting we get.
Yes, but we have to wait till, so the state hasn't told us yet when CCRPI and grad rate will be calculated.
Yeah,
We know typically it's gonna come October, November. That's when we will know when it's an embargo, like the state has to roll all of that out.
Okay.
So it's like the,
so December-ish is when we'll get the update on the prior year's performance of
Lagging.
CIS. Okay, okay.
Yep.
All right.
okay. I think we did questions. So now, guess what? Amanda has been in front of us a lot today. And this is now the last piece, and it's around policy. So due to House Bill 268, which is the safety bill, there are a couple of policies that we need to address and needs to be effective June 1, 2025. So we need to waive what would be considered the 2 meeting requirement in policy for that. So that will be the first recommendation that Mrs. Lynch is going to read, and then Dr. Sultan will solicit the motion and all the things.
Great.
I don't know.
And I'll let everyone know that Jill is here as well, and can speak to this because this really came from legal with the House bill that was passed as well. So may I read the first recommendation?
Yes, please.
The recommendation being made is that the Board of Education waive the 2 meeting limitation and take immediate action to revise existing policies, JBC, JR, and JRB, as a result of new state legislation, that's HB 268, which requires these policies to be in place by June 1st, 2025.
Do I have a motion to waive the 2 meeting limitation and take immediate action to revise existing policies JBC, JR, and JRB as a result of a new state legislation which requires these policies to be in place by June 1st, 2025?
So moved.
Board Member Utz makes a motion. Is there a second? Second. Board Member Johnson Davis seconds the motion. Is there any discussion?
Just want to make sure that this is going to be very clearly posted so the community can see, like, we are waiving the review process, but just making sure that this is going to be out in front of the public.
Yeah, so it's in the assembly agenda that, and what the first item on it is the waive.
Yeah.
And then the red lines of the 3 policies are also on the agenda with the red lines posted as
And
well.
Do we want this is more of a communications question, but do we want a press release or something that we can put out to the community so that they are aware that this is what we did and why?
We can we'll do the meeting recap, like we typically do for a board meeting. That's what we did for the special call meeting.
Okay,
Typically, our retreat does not have a press release post. What we do is provide the board meeting recap. And that's for any meeting, but I'll make sure for this that we do it.
yeah, I was gonna say, that just a special case.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Mhm.
Okay. No further questions.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously.
All right, the next recommendation is the recommendation being made is that the Board of Education approve policy JBC, school admissions for action.
Do I have a motion to approve the recommendation to approve policy JBC admissions for action?
So moved.
Board Member Herndon makes a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Board Member Utz seconds the motion. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously.
Right, the next recommendation, the recommendation being made is that the Board of Education approve policy JR, student records for action.
A motion to approve the recommendation to approve policy JR, student records for action.
So moved.
Board Member Utz makes the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Board Member Herndon seconds the motion. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously.
Right, and finally, the recommendation being made is that the Board of Education approve policy JRB, Parents' Bill of Rights for action.
Do I have a motion to approve the recommendation to approve policy JRB, Parents' Bill of Rights for action?
So moved.
Board Member Utz makes a motion. Is there a second? Second. Board Member Johnson Davis seconds the motion. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to move into executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel and legal matters?
So moved. You move to executive session.
Thank you. Board Member Herndon makes a motion. Is there a second? Second. Board Member Johnson Davis seconds the motion. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. We're moving to executive session.
No, well, put up that, where we're in the executive session slide.
Okay.
But we're muted, correct?
Yeah, I'll maybe do that now.
There's not first.
We have a